Hi everyone, this is the second part of my three-part sequence on international economics. After covering net exports in the first video, we'll now turn our attention to exchange rates. Now that we've got an idea of the two ways to calculate net exports, let's now think about the exchange rate and how the exchange rate can influence net exports. The notation for the exchange rate is R, so R is interpreted as how much foreign currency one US dollar can buy. For simplicity, let's suppose that $1 can buy 100 Japanese yen. This implies that R equals 100. Conversely, this implies that 1 Japanese yen can buy 1 cent. This table shows us the actual exchange rates between the US dollar and various foreign currencies in August 2013. Notice at the time that $1 buys 96.23 Japanese yen, which is pretty close to our numerical example in the previous slide. However, the exchange rate doesn't necessarily stay fixed over time. Let's suppose that today the exchange rate between the US dollar and the Japanese yen is R equals 100. This means that the US dollar can buy more Japanese yen today than it could back in August 2013. In other words, the US dollar appreciated in value, which can also be referred to as the dollar getting stronger. Conversely, let's suppose that today's exchange rate between the US dollar and the euro is R equals 0.5, implying that $1 can buy half a euro. Based on the previous slide, $1 bought 0.75 euros back in August 2013, so this means that the US dollar has depreciated in value, which can also be referred to as the dollar getting weaker. If the dollar appreciates against a foreign currency, then this implies that the foreign currency depreciated against the dollar. Or vice versa, if the dollar depreciates against a foreign currency, then this must mean that the foreign currency appreciated against the dollar. This slide presents a numerical example of the US dollar depreciating against the Japanese yen. Notice that this case is represented as a decrease in R, meaning that the US dollar bought less Japanese yen in January 2009 versus January 2008. Again, if this happens, we could say that the dollar had become weaker over time. Conversely, the same number suggests that the Japanese yen has gotten stronger. Since 1 Japanese yen can buy more US dollars, or in this case, less than 1 cent in January 2008, but just over 1 cent in January 2009, then the Japanese yen indeed appreciated during this time period. A weaker American dollar necessarily means that the other currency got stronger. So how does a weaker or stronger dollar affect net exports? When the dollar appreciates, foreign products become cheaper. At the same time, American products become relatively more expensive. For example, let's suppose that the exchange rate between the dollar and the euro is 1-to-1, or in other words, R equals 1. If this is the case, then a $200 phone in the US would also cost 200 euros. If the dollar appreciates such that R equals 1.2, then the same $200 phone now costs 240 euros. Given that the phone now costs 240 euros instead of 200 euros before, France is less likely to buy the relatively more expensive American phone now that the dollar has appreciated against the euro. As a result, US exports to France will decrease. At the same time, you can imagine that this stronger dollar will make French wine relatively cheaper, so we'll import more French wine. Less exports and more imports lead to a reduction in net exports. This would further exacerbate the trade deficit discussed in the first video for this chapter. Recall from the chapter on the aggregate demand and aggregate supply model that the aggregate demand curve is based on GDP. Since an appreciation of the US dollar against the euro leads to lower net exports, then the stronger dollar causes aggregate demand to decrease, or the AD curve to shift to the left. If a stronger dollar leads to a reduction in GDP due to lower net exports, then perhaps the Fed's response to an appreciation of the dollar is to engage in expansionary monetary policy. As we've learned before, expansionary monetary policy can be implemented in the form of lower interest rates. Not only would this encourage more household consumption and business investment, but now we can understand how lower interest rates can lead to an increase in net exports. Again, expansionary monetary policy leads to more M1, but a larger supply of dollars will depreciate the dollar just like the price of diamonds would decrease if De Beers flooded the market with its secret inventory of diamonds. Remember, an increase in supply is associated with a shift in the supply curve to the right, leading to a lower equilibrium price if demand is unchanged. The punchline here is that expansionary monetary policy boosts GDP by increasing household consumption, business investment, and net exports. Now that you have an understanding of exchange rates, you can now move on to the third and final part of the three-part sequence, which covers the pros and cons of free trade. Feel free to email me with any questions that you have.